Hi everyone, I'm Dr. Jennifer Jackson, and I'm a registered nurse and an assistant professor at the Faculty of Nursing at the University of Calgary. And this is a quick video to talk about different strategies to edit your work. So you can apply these in different ways, and this looks at both content but also language. And I'm including some considerations for students that are not first language English. And this is drawn on my experience of years of working with students from a variety of backgrounds, and also from recent literature and different academic experiences of colleagues as well. So there's a few different strategies to use to edit your work. Sitting at the screen after, X number of hours, and you might have, four empty Red Bull cans in front of you and a Tegaderm on your coccyx. You're not going to do great editing. So we have to try and start with setting yourself up for success. So the first thing to do is leave time to edit. Don't try and work all the way through and then click send. I mean, let's be honest, we've all been there. There's times where something just has to get done and you get to the end of the deadline and that's all you can do. So, don't be hard on yourself if that's the case, but you want to look at your assignments and look at the material you've been given and then see how you can budget your time accordingly. So I suggest, particularly for undergrad, but for everybody, it helps to think of like your time is a bit like a bank account. So if you have something that's worth 5% of your overall mark, you need to spend an appropriate amount of time on that. Whereas if you have something that's worth 40% of your overall mark, that gets a bigger investment of your time than something that's 5%. The thing that's 5%, you know what, if it's a stressful time, you might say, I write that the night before, look through it once, click send, it's done. If I only get a C, I accept that I get a C because it's not the highest priority. However, the item that's 40%, I am going to finish that at least a week in advance, leaving me lots of time to edit my work. So those are important calculations you have to make right when you start. So when you get your syllabus, look at what the deadlines are for the year, map them all out from the very beginning. I love those calendars on the wall that have 4 months or a whole term worth of time so you can see. Get yourself splurge on the stationery. I'm a qualitative researcher, so I'm all about the stationery. You can splurge, get different markers, label different things, and highlight priority assignment for this course, priority assignment for that course, so that you can budget accordingly and use your time such that you can set yourself up so you can write effectively and then edit. One of the worst ways to approach your academic work is do one thing, then do the next thing, then do the next thing, then do the next thing. You need to think about, okay, I have 5 readings for this course. I can give that 2 hours. And so how am I going to be smart with these readings and make sure I cover the material? Or which reading is the most important? Start with that. So there's lots of different ways you have to kind of negotiate and prioritize within your work. But for those of you who are nursing students, you're going to be triaging anyway when you're out working clinically. So it's the same skill. You just have to practice it with like a different type of thing. Rather than patients, you're looking at your assignments and that type of thing. So aim to finish at least a week in advance if it's a big assignment, because one of the best strategies I can offer you for editing is that you need to leave some time between the writing of the assignment and the editing of the assignment. So I find that when you've been staring at a screen for a while, you don't even see the words anymore. And you read what you want it to say. Our brain does lots of like cognitive filling in for us. And you read what you want it to say, maybe not what the text actually says. The other thing is that you can start to miss things like the word form or from might get mixed up, and spell check's not going to pick that up. But it might be something that changes the whole meaning of the work that you're writing. You absolutely need to use spell check and grammar check. For native English speakers, the ones that are built in with Word or with Google Docs are probably adequate. I've had quite a few English additional language students using Grammarly or things like that. I haven't used it myself. This is not a review of that product. I have no connection to them, so I can't speak to that. I think things like that can be useful, but sometimes it's more important to say, rather than just fix each mistake as you go, try and look and say, where am I falling down? Like, what is being flagged across my paper, and find the biggest barrier to understanding and see if you can do some reading around that. Spending some time reading and improving your grammar is an investment in your writing. And if you spend 5 minutes there, you will save yourself 25 hours of editing over the course of your university career. So if you're having struggles with repeated things, see if you can learn a bit more about those things so that you can kind of get better at that and improve globally across the board. Now, there's special considerations for people who have learning difficulties, people with dyslexia, and different things like that. That's a bit beyond what I'm covering in this video, but know that there's a lot of assistive software available, and thankfully, it's getting better and better, and there's lots of things that are available to you. Most institutions will have an accessibility office, and they can offer you specific software that's either covered by the university or that you can get with government funding. There's all kinds of different options that way. So if you have challenges with that sense, or you think maybe you have dyslexia, you've never been diagnosed, don't be scared to ask for help, because there's lots of help available. There are people that it is their full-time job to support students with that. So don't be shy. Your tuition is paying for those resources. Take advantage of them. So I'm going to switch to a document here. So we said that you're going to make sure that you have time to edit. Leave yourself time in the first place. Another strategy, and I want to be a little bit careful with this one, is to send it to someone else, have somebody else read it. Especially if you're on a bit of a time crunch, that's great, because it's not your eyeballs that are having to do all the work. Now, we have to be very careful in our academic community about academic integrity, plagiarism, things like that. So it's probably not the best idea to send an assignment to someone else who is in the same section of the same course. Because if you start editing, naturally, I think our inclination is to edit things in the tone and the voice that we write, rather than to necessarily make sure we keep the author's tone and voice. And if you're collaborating really closely on something, you run a risk of overlapping. And then there becomes questions of academic integrity. And it might not be purposeful. It might just be the case that you've read each other's assignments. But I would say the consequences of that are so severe, don't even flirt with that problem. What you can do instead is, it's great to have colleagues and friends in other disciplines. Send your psychology friend your nursing paper, and then they can send their psychology papers to you. So they're similar enough that you'll probably understand there'll be some crossover in the concepts. It's not like asking you to read something that's really heavy and, mathematics, for example, but they're also different enough that there's no way that you could be doing the other person's work for them. What you're doing is checking for editing. So if you have a buddy or a partner or something like that, that can work really well. I would caution very carefully about hiring anyone. You need to be very aware of who that person is and what their intentions are. And it kind of goes without saying, don't send your stuff to a website, run from that. That is just asking for trouble. If you have a known proofreader and you want to pay them, that's at your discretion, but make sure that is allowed within the parameters of that course and within the parameters of that university. So sometimes you're not allowed to have term papers professionally edited, but if you have a thesis, you can use professional editing for your thesis, because it's assumed that it's at a different level. So just be aware of those things and check into it. Also, libraries are amazing. They have tons of great resources. If you haven't already asked your library, almost all universities in the West can provide some type of like student success, student writing support, those kinds of things. So try and seek all of those resources out. So that's looking at kind of some global things. Now I'm going to switch to looking more specifically at a piece of work. So this is a publication I am writing up, and I want to just show you a few different strategies you can use individually with the technology. So the first thing is you have to make sure it's spell checked and grammar checked. I draw on the wisdom of Tara Brabazon talking about how she wants to weep when students send things in that she has to spend 3 hours spell and grammar checking. I completely support that. Please do that work for us. It just puts everybody in a better mood to start. So here, my spell check is not really working. If your spell check is not working, things you can do, come down here and make sure you are in the right language. So click here. Now you probably hear the accent, I'm Canadian, but I've also lived abroad. And so I sometimes, depending on who I'm writing for, I have to go back and forth between Canadian English and United Kingdom English. The other thing you need to do is check. Sometimes if you switch languages, this box automatically gets checked. So it will be checking your spelling or grammar for you, or it will not be doing that. And you need to make sure that you've got this box unchecked. So then you can hit OK. If you're still having any issues, on your review ribbon, hit editor, and then it'll pop up over here, checking spelling for English and different types of English, and then it'll flag where there's an issue. This is not foolproof. I find that if I write something like here, you can see I've got conceptualizations with the UK spelling. I'll just bring that up a little bit. Oops. If I had written this with a Z, it's not necessarily going to show up as a spelling mistake. So you also have to know what the differences are between, say, UK and American, or UK and Canadian spelling, or India versus UK, any of those countries. If you're going back and forth between the writing styles, or you're writing for a journal that's in a different jurisdiction, you need to have the base of you need to have the base knowledge yourself, because spell check won't necessarily flag if this is a correct word and it's used correctly in the sentence, but if I have a different nationality type of spelling here, it might not flag that. So something to be aware of. Now, when you're editing the document itself, there's a few different strategies you can use. The best is to get away from it for a few days. So this is why I say write, and then a week in advance, leave it. Take at least 2 days where you do not look at this document. Then you can come back, read it again, and shake with terror of all the mistakes that you've made, if you're me. But I would say then you can see it with fresh eyes, and then you can fix things. Another strategy you can use when you're reading through is also props to Tara Brabazon. I'm riffing off her work here a little bit. Is that don't try and fix everything in one read through. Read through the first time and say, do all my ideas make sense, and are they in an order that makes sense? Read through the second time and check that each paragraph connects to the paragraph before and the paragraph after, and that all the sentences in that paragraph are about the same thing. Another time you read through, check spelling and grammar. Another time you read through, check for different technical things you need to include. So that's been transformational for me, is to don't try and edit once and get everything done. Edit for different things, and then edit different ways when you go through. So the first thing you'll want to do is make sure your ideas flow in a logical order, and that you've got good proportions in what you're writing. If your introduction takes up 3/4 of your assignment, something's off. So you need to look and make sure you've got kind of good proportion as you're going through. When you're editing your work, a great trick, particularly for people, well, particularly for anyone, is to read aloud. So, not sure if you can hear it, but Word and Adobe can do this as well. Word will read your work to you. And I find that, I mean, it is a little bit, it pauses and, you know, it's not like a nice natural parlance, but at the same time, you can hear mistakes. So you're calling on a different, rather than read them or see them, you're calling on your hearing to help you identify mistakes. And that's a nice shift. So hopefully it can help you say, hold on a second, that doesn't sound right. And then go back and look and see where things are. You can also use this to read your work to you. Or read your textbooks to you. And I suggest you look into accessible software because that's available too. So if you're cooking dinner, you can be doing your readings at the same time by having your computer read aloud your readings to you. So read aloud is a great one. Another technique that works is going backwards. So I don't mean read word for word backwards, but read this sentence here, then read this sentence here. This is a good way to check for grammar and for spelling, is because then you can make sure that this sentence all makes sense individually. And if you're going backwards, then you're kind of interrupting that cognitive flow of like, then I said this, then I said that, then I said this, then I said that. When you're doing it backwards, you don't necessarily anticipate that next sentence in the same way. So then you can go through and check that each sentence is correct. Another thing that helps is to just zoom way out. So sometimes when you're going along, you can just scroll through your work and see if anything wonky is happening. So like when I'm looking through this, I've got a pretty big gap here. Normally this would be a bit of a red flag, but this journal wants their figures in text. And so I know that my next page is a figure. So it's fine that there's a gap here, but it can help you say, you know, does everything look even? Take a quick glance and make sure, okay, paragraph, 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 paragraph. If this was all one paragraph and you didn't see any indentation here, I'd start to get nervous because this is pretty long to be all one phrase. So you can also just have a quick look. Okay, does everything look okay? Is it lined up? Are there several indents on each page? That type of thing. And then other strategies you can use are reading out loud yourself, because then you're engaging multiple cognitive skills. So you're using your eyeballs to see the word, you're identifying the word in your brain, and then you're also saying the word coming out of your mouth, and you can hear yourself talk. So I don't mean to be crude about that, but you've got a lot of different senses involved. And so it gives you a better chance of catching a mistake. So if I were to say the first sub-theme in the emotional labor narrative is the development of emotional labor as a concept in nursing. Going through that way, for me personally, this is my most effective technique, is reading out loud. Because if you're reading something, you're like, hold on, that sounds strange, you can help pick it up and say something's not working in this sentence, even if the spelling is okay. The other thing you can do is, I found particularly some students where they use different types of phrasing in their languages, they have a hard time in English because they write really long sentences, like one sentence will be 4, 5, 6 lines long. And if you're kind of mentally going from one language to a next, that can make sense to help shape the ideas. But in English, you need to have kind of err on the shorter side of the phrasing. And the reason you do that is because it requires less cognitive work from your reader. If your reader has a really long sentence, they need to hold a lot in your working memory. So if you have to hold a lot in your working memory, it's a harder read. And so here I've got, this one's pretty long. I should probably, as I'm editing these again, I should probably break this up a bit. But here I'm asking the reader to hold 1, 2, 3, 4 ideas in their mind at the same time. So this maybe isn't the most effective way for me to write. Whereas if I split the sentence right here, then I'm only going to be asking them to hold 2 ideas in their mind and then another 2 ideas in their mind. So that's why you want to have the shorter phrases, is because it makes your reader use their working memory less, which makes it easier to read when you're reading English script. So if a quick rule of thumb for this is, if you're reading and you find you're going along and saying, the sociological concept of emotional labor comes from Arlie Hochschild, who defined emotional labor as the commodification of managed emotions where employees induce or suppress their feelings. So I exaggerate there, but if you get to the point where you need to breathe when you're reading out loud before you get to the end of your sentence is probably too long. Now, if you've got 1 or 2 of those in your whole paper, that's okay. But if you're doing that on every page, you've really got to cut them back. So know that in English, shorter phrases are generally better. And you want to think about keeping short, manageable pieces of information. And if you do have longer phrasing, you need to use punctuation to help break it up, or just make additional sentences. So I'll come back to, nope, gonna flounder with Zoom for another minute. So those are some overview strategies of how you can use tools that are embedded in Word, or strategies you already have. You don't necessarily need to pay for proofreading or for additional software. If those are valuable to you, I mean, go ahead and do it, as long as it's within the parameters of academic integrity for your institution. But try and use some different strategies to edit, because editing moves your mark up so much. I cannot tell you. It's when you are evaluating 126 essays from a class, it is immediately apparent which ones have been edited and which ones have not. And as much as educators try and have a very strict adherence to the rubric, you get a sense of the paper quite quickly. And if somebody sends me a paper and there's 4 mistakes in the first paragraph, my heart has sunk, and it's really hard to win me back over in the rest of the assignment. So if your paper has a lot of distracting mistakes in it, I'm not focusing on your ideas. I'm struggling to read the work, and then that's where the emphasis gets placed. So spending that extra time editing means that I focus on your ideas, and in the end, the debate about ideas, it's what gets you a better mark. So I hope those strategies are useful. Feel free to comment if you have strategies of your own, and good luck with all your writing.